God, that would be heartbreaking if I went to the Space Force and wound up facing the Federation version of me, all clean cut. I'm like, fuck, I'm the bad guy.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG Podcast. I am Clayton.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Kyle Perkins.
And I'm John.
And we have a guest this time, but before we go into all that, you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliarmedia. And if you would like to help us out with hosting costs, you can do so at patreon.com/alienfamiliarmedia. Any help you would be able to give would be very greatly appreciated. Today, we have a guest speaking with us, returning guest, John. Well,
yay!
First time we were talking about your books. This time we are just talking about a subject that we all love, in addition to role-playing games and merges with role-playing games. We talked about Star Trek a few episodes ago, and we literally did not have enough time to talk about everything that we love about Star Trek. And John reached out to me and said, hey, I have a lot of points I want to make about Star Trek too. Can we do another one? Can you guys do another one with me on it? And I was like, hell yeah, let's do that.
Immediately, yes. I was going to start singing Faith of the Heart, when you said Star Trek, to kind of call back to the Star Trek sting that I hummed last time, but I will spare you. I will spare us all.
Yeah. It's been a long road getting from there to here. It has been a long time, but my time, it's near.
I'm going where my heart will take me. That's and that is this podcast, apparently. I was going to say, at this point, is John now still in the credits, special guest appearance, or is he up to featuring now?
Yeah, right. With and right. With Jon Cassie as fourth chair.
Well, the threshold is 3 times being on, because that's what Doug had to do in order to go from special guest to
featuring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't realize we had our own system for that. That's great. You got to get one more in there.
Yeah. With Jon Cassie as fourth chair and Robert O'Reilly as Gowron. Yeah. I find your podcast disturbing.
I'm sure many people do, and that's probably usually my fault.
Yeah. Your podcast, it brings honor to your house. Gowron eyes. So, you brought up Enterprise and its problematic theme song. Should we start there by ranking the theme songs of the programs? Is this where you're throwing down already on the music? Is that where you want to go?
Sure, absolute. From bottom to top, it is the latter seasons of Enterprise. Second from the bottom the first seasons of Enterprise.
God bless. Could you take it and make it any more problematic? Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Try me.
Yeah. Oh, have you challenged me? Oh, let me see how you think of this. Oh, yeah, that 3-4 was dreadful.
Does, having not watched any of it, and now I can say any of this one either, do Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard have themes?
Yes.
They do.
And how are they?
Well, Picard is kind of interesting. It's got an intro that is very much a product of TV right now. It reminds me a whole lot of Westworld and stuff like that, real slow CGI kind of stuff, and it's sort of moody. Kind of like the Game of Thrones opening-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. All that kind of vibe.
Right. Game of Thrones' opening is very kind of martial and heroic, and, the Picard opening very much is reminiscent of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, The Inner Light, where he has this sort of lifetime experience in sort of 10 minutes of real time in this sort of alien probe, right? He plays his flute, right? It's got these kind of flute notes, right?
Oh, that's fun.
And I thought, this is very sort of gentle and kind of a lot of woodwinds, very atmospheric, right? The Picard opening has a musical callback to Star Trek The Next Generation. Mm-hmm. Discovery has a musical callback to Star Trek The Original Series. I think the Discovery theme is outstanding. It's one of my favorites. I quite like it. And the opening title sequence is done in this kind of animation technique that I quite like. They're both very sort of prestige format television, very modern, right? You know, it's like, oh, am I watching, Watchmen? Am I watching, The Handmaid's Tale, Man in the High Castle, 6 Feet Under, Sopranos? It's all that kind of thing. But they harken back, to the originals. So,
John, what's your thoughts on Discovery? We didn't really get into Discovery very much. I don't know if either of these guys have seen much of it. No. I only watched the first season and tapped out, so that spoiler on how I feel about it. But what do you think of it?
I think that Discovery has a lot to offer as a Star Trek fan. Mm-hmm. I think that season 2 is its strengths are stronger than season 1's, and its problems are more problematic than season 1. So it's a little bit more, the gap between this is really great and this is really problematic is wider. Mm-hmm. The way that I describe it is that in the first half of Discovery, it really hits its plot beats quite well, but its emotional beats don't really kind of work. Mm-hmm. But in the second half, the opposite is true. The plot is like barely holding together, but the emotional beats are so on point that it's unlike anything I've ever seen in Star Trek. The character of Christopher Pike and the version of Spock that we see are extraordinarily compelling. Anson Mount is so talented. He plays Captain Pike. And Ethan Peck's Spock is dynamite. I mean, those characters are so good. And as it becomes ever clearer what the Discovery crew is going to have to do in order to resolve the problem that they find themselves in, it just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. Now, it's not perfect by any stretch, but if you are interested in doing Star Trek as a role-playing game, if you're a GM and you're thinking, this might be a universe I want to work in, you really ought to watch that second season because it's so tight as a narrative arc that you can see, okay, a campaign of Star Trek could look just like this, and it would be profoundly satisfying to players to engage with it, right? But again, it's not perfect, because of the intense focus on the character Michael Burnham. You don't get the sort of ensemble vibe that you get in every other Star Trek program, and that I think is really essential to Star Trek as as kind of a media property, and also as a gaming, as an intellectual property. Right. I think Star Trek is perhaps one of the best suited of all kind of intellectual property universes to set a role-playing game in. But I think if you watch season 1 and you didn't watch season 2, that's you did it wrong.
Are they
watch
are
2
they
and
as
not
radically
1.
different as it seems to be? Like, from the little bit I've read, it sounds like there's almost like a hard break between like season 1 and season 2, and part of the saltiness I had is when I found out that they just completely ripped off the whole first season storyline from some guy's game. But there's
I didn't know that.
This like real indie, sort of a visual novel kind of game that some guy came out with a few years ago, and the whole thing with the tardigrade and like the teleporting and all that stuff, and like right down to individual characters. Yeah, right down to individual characters. They just completely lifted the whole thing, and they're like in a legal battle with this guy about it now because he hadn't watched it, and one of his friends just like got a hold of him. He's like, dude, your game is on Star Trek. And he's like, what?
The game was called Tardigrades, came out in 2014, and according to a 2018 article, It looks like that creator of that game felt like he had no choice but to take CBS to court. I don't know the result of that. I don't want to spend my entire time here researching, but yeah, I actually, Jordan, I think you might have mentioned that to me a while back, but I had forgotten and I didn't look into it any further. But yeah, this Tardigrades game, it looks like some kind of sci-fi game where people are using and abusing little tardigrade life forms to travel around. That's crazy.
Yep.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I would be salty about that too. But I didn't know.
So they got some original writers for season 2, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about any more deep takes that they stole from other folks, if they did. But yeah, season 2 really felt deeply embedded within Star Trek's canon, and sort of respectful to it, to the degree that it could be. Right? I mean, Discovery's whole premise requires a little bit of hoop jumping.
Well, being the most exposed person to Discovery here, could you break it down for me where Discovery actually fits into the various timelines we have to work with now? Because there's so much that just didn't make any sense to me. So, like...
Right, okay. So, Star Trek, the original series. Okay, we'll start there. Okay? Captain Kirk has been captain of the Enterprise for a short period of time when we meet him, okay, in Star Trek, the original series, okay? Spock had served on Enterprise for 15 years, largely under Christopher Pike, okay? When we pick up Discovery, we're about 15 years before Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm sorry, Star Trek The Original Series, okay? So we are, we have an Enterprise. It is captained by Christopher Pike. It is staffed by a female exec named Number One. It has on board a crewman, named Spock. So all of those sort of callbacks to the Cage, okay, the original pilot, right? But Discovery, and you'd have to watch season 2. I'd have to do some spoilery kind of things to sort of explain the next thing. But Discovery is essentially, it sort of goes into sort of a pocket timeline. It sort of goes into its own timeline. You know what I'm saying?
So does that explain the weird looking Klingons and the like crazy different technology and,
The technology is explained within the show as sort of a way that the Federation was developing technology that, as a result of Discovery season 1 and 2, this through line of technology is actually the wrong direction. So we ought to go in a different one. Okay. It's kind of like a Galactica sort of thing, right? The only reason Galactica survived is because we don't have networked computers, right? Right. It's that kind of thing.
Okay.
And the weird Klingon thing is what the explanation offered there is, well, you have so many different Klingon houses and they all look rather different. And the particular houses that we interacted with in season 1, we're not really interacting with in the original series and onward. So, you end up with sort of wharfy kinds of Klingons, and then you end up with Klingons who end up looking like humans. That's explained in Enterprise. And then, you've got these more kind of bestial Klingons that we see in Discovery. And that's just a function of being different houses, right?
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, that's fine. That's a perfectly good explanation. Yeah. So Enterprise is first, obviously, and then roughly, say, 70 years after is Discovery, and then 15 years on is the original series.
All right.
Yeah. And the reason why there are no spore drive equipped ships is also explained on the show, but I would have to spoil again to go into detail, so I probably shouldn't.
Okay.
But so Star Trek Discovery does take place not in a different universe, like the Kelvin universe. It is the canon universe.
It is, yes.
Interesting, okay. Well, to bring it back around to RPGs a bit, then, do you feel like there would be, and I guess you've already sort of answered this, but do you feel like there's enough kind of richness of content in the Star Trek Discovery presented kind of canon to have lots of gaming opportunities within that universe, within that, it's not a universe, within that show?
100%, yeah. Yeah, there's look, the great thing about every Star Trek program is almost every episode gives an adventure hook. It's like, well, what about those people? And, okay, well, we talk to these guys, this faction, but we don't talk to that faction. What if we had a ship go and talk to those people, right? And Discovery is exactly the same. I think there's a lot of aftermath from the Klingon War, from Discovery 1, that you could very productively explore. I mean, that's essentially what Discovery Season 2, Episode 1 is about. There's this kind of Red Angel kind of master story, but embedded within it is this very, Episode 1 is very tight kind of discovery of a ship a Federation ship that is somewhere where it ought not to be. And, okay, well, I mean, like you said in your previous episode, what is, a Star Trek game is about analysis, and it's about discovery, and it's about science and this kind of thing. It's like, well, you find something that is anomalous. In Star Trek, you turn your sensors on and, set a course, right? And so, you can imagine a war that raged across the entirety of the galaxy known to that point, dropping all kinds of interesting adventure hooks, that players could follow, right? Now, they're not going to do the main line of Discovery's story, obviously, because that's Discovery's story. But the universe as depicted, there's plenty there.
It's my understanding that a lot of the events in Star Trek Discovery are kind of top secret, right?
Indeed.
Definitely in the first season, at least.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess you could choose to have your players be in the know, so to speak. They have the appropriate clearance. Or you could run a more standard Star Trek story. More classic is a better term, maybe. Star Trek story that happens to get swept up once the events of Star Trek Discovery, I'm assuming here, kind of stop being top secret. At some point, they kind of explode into the non-secret world, perhaps.
I'm not at liberty to answer that.
Ooh. I'll have to watch it.
You have to watch, right? So look, to your point, here's how I would do it. If I had a group of guys and friends who wanted to do a Discovery era story, I would start with them encountering or dealing with the USS John Glenn, the other mycelial network-equipped ship, which, of course, has a terrible accident in Discovery Season 1, and you learn things from it. Right. Now, the only other ship equipped with that drive is Discovery. The Glenn is a total loss, right? But have the crew encounter the Glenn, get a distress call or something before the Glenn is entirely destroyed, and then breadcrumb them into some other aspect of that mycelial network, because there's other ways to get in, which we learn in Season 2, okay? And do a whole kind of like space mysticism kind of thing that involves that drive, and, maybe there are religious fanatics or science fanatics who are trying to find their own way in for their own reasons, and boom. That's 10 games right there. Right. I mean, if you want to do a Discovery era thing, or you could do, right, Enterprise was on a deep space mission when that war with the Klingons started in Season 1. It was so far away that recalling it back to fight was seen as, well, it's going to take them so long. Good grief, the subspace message to get to them is going to take 3 months. Leave them there, right? Well, the Enterprise crew spends a lot of Season 2 trying to reconcile the fact that when the Federation was getting its ass kicked, they were nowhere to be found. We're the best ship in the fleet, and you left us out there? That makes no sense, right? So maybe you have another ship on a deep space mission, but this one is not so deep, and it gets called back, and it has adventures along the way, learns things about the Klingons, and that kind of thing, right? And is involved in a decisive battle that ends the war that we don't see on Discovery.
Yeah, the ship that gets recalled inadvertently, their most direct path back to the Federation goes through Klingon space.
Precisely. Yeah. And so you end up with a kind of, a game where there's a lot of starship combat and a lot of those kinds of decisions. I mean, again, it depends on the kind of players that you have, right? But you've got a million powers. If you look at any kind of galactic map of where the Federation is and what have you, just pick a place that's remote from Earth and draw a line, and you're going to end up, oh, all right, well, in order to get back to the Federation, the fastest route is through Tholian space. All right, well, we've never done that. Let's try that. Or you got to either go through Romulan space, or you're going to have to go around. And the Romulans are problematic in 100 different ways, and they're not really well known, right? Because canonically, in the Discovery era, the Federation has never even seen a Romulan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, well, do that, right? You could do it in the game, and on, right? But yeah, Discovery's certainly a worthy place to do a game. And of course, the Mirror Universe. Give me a break, right? There's now a whole season of Star Trek Discovery 1 that is profoundly influenced by the Mirror Universe. And there's Mirror from the original series, and there's all that great Mirror Universe stuff from Deep Space Nine.
And
can't go wrong.
Two of the greatest episodes of Enterprise took place entirely in the Mirror Universe.
Full stop.
They even changed the theme song for this show for 2 episodes to something that was vastly superior to most of the other Star Trek themes.
It was so great. Yeah. I watched Enterprise when it came out for like a season and a half, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I love Star Trek, but this show is killing me. And last year, I rewatched everything but Voyager, basically. Okay, just have it on background. At this point, I've watched so much Trek that I can basically it's like a radio play,
mm-hmm.
right? And after DS9, which is still my favorite of all the Trek programs, we can come back to that. I started Voyager, and I was like, I'm not ready for Voyager. Voyager's so problematic. I'm not ready. So I went on to Enterprise, and I had rewatched it. I'd watched it full for the first time maybe 5-6 years ago. I was like, okay, whatever. In rewatching it, I liked it a lot more. I was really surprised. And I was like, it's a shame they didn't get more, because they really had sort of figured out the show by season 3, right? But they'd done so much damage to it in the first 2 seasons that there was no one left watching.
Yeah, I literally could not watch Enterprise until it was streaming, so I could skip the intro.
Right.
A lot of people felt that way.
Right. I totally hear you. But those episodes, those Mirror Universe episodes of Enterprise, awesome. So yeah.
So we've talked a lot about Discovery,
which I think is really good, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
Because prior to you guesting here, John, I don't think the 3 of us could have had a worthwhile discussion about Discovery.
It would have been Jordan talking.
Nobody wants to hear that.
No.
But no, I'm actually really glad we covered that. As much as even with Enterprise back when it was airing, like I think it's very common for fans of anything, but we'll say Trek fans, to kind of look at the new thing happening with very skeptical eyes. Can we do anything with this at all? And I'm glad to hear we can do things with Discovery. And anyway.
Yeah, you definitely can. And if your original series lore is strong, then you can sort of backdate stuff in the original series into the Discovery era that could be really sort of interesting, right? Like, where's the planet killer? Where are the space hippies? one of my favorite parts of the original series, one of my favorite episodes of the original series is called Assignment Earth, which was a backdoor pilot for a kind of future-informed kind of spy caper program starring a character named Gary Seven. And if you haven't seen that episode of the original series, Run, Don't Walk, watch it. It is extraordinarily fun. And this guy is, kind of a hyperspace James Bond from the 29th galaxy, this kind of thing, right? And he could be totally knocking around in Discovery. If he showed up in a Discovery episode in season 3, I would totally roll with it. Of course Gary Seven's there. Of course he is, right? That kind of thing, right? So the more you know your lore, the more you can backwards fill original series stuff back into Discovery. Just like TNG will make references to the original series and so forth, right?
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Where were you going to take us, Clayton?
I was just going to try to talk more about like the series I'm familiar with, which is everything before CBS All Access came about.
Right.
I want to focus kind of like we had talked about, like kind of playing in the setting that are kind of in the margins of the of all of the Star Trek things that we see on TV, like all of the and in the movies, but all of the periphery things. Like we have a couple of episodes, particularly of Deep Space Nine, that take place on Earth, so you get to see a little bit of what Earth is like. In the 24th century, there's a couple of TNG episodes that are set on Earth. And those are always, like, those have been my favorite episodes because you're getting a slice of not only what the exploratory / militaristic branch of the future is like, but you're also kind of getting a slice of life of what just everybody's lives are like and how all of this more evolved sense of yourself idea that is espoused in Star Trek, kind of how a normal person interacts with that. Because
for sure.
So we really don't see a whole lot of what anyone other than senior Starship staff or Deep Space Station staff, how they view the world, how they view the galaxy, their place in it. There's really very few instances where we get to see where the episode Lower Decks, where we get to see what like very junior people, like just enlisted people, what their experience is like and what their experience is like and what the lives of the people back on Earth are like, or the people. You get some episodes where the ships or whoever is going to help solve a problem of colonists. And those are areas that I would love to mine to just get the ideas of how can I put Star Trek into a game that has a different feel than what a traditional Star Trek show would have. You still have all the ideas of why the Federation is so important. All of these peoples are fully indoctrinated in that view of what humanity should be like. But to lift a quote from Ben Sisko in look at the people who are living out there, people on Earth, like he says, it's easy to be a saint in paradise, but out there, like talking about the fringes, there are no saints, just people. Right.
Yeah, for sure. If you want a sense of what Earth is like in the future, you really have to look at DS9, because Sisko's dad runs a restaurant in New Orleans, and he and Jake, particularly at the beginning of season 7, spend a great deal of time there. And there's also many episodes before then where they return to Earth for various reasons. And just about the only kind of regular person perspective you get is Joseph Sisko, and Jake to some extent.
A little bit Picard's family, Robert and his wife and nephew.
Indeed, right. Yeah. That episode was dynamite.
Very good episode.
Oh, my word. But we don't get so much of that, but you get a little bit of it in those places. And Star Trek Picard Episode 1.
Oh, yeah.
You have kind of a sense of, again, from the perspective of the great man, right? But you get a little bit of it. It'd be totally interesting to set a game that has these deep civilian connections, right? You want to get a sense of what Vulcan is like, you have to go to Enterprise, right? Because both of those programs, particularly Vulcan, Enterprise takes place, there are whole arcs that take place on Vulcan, which is pretty cool. And we go to Andor in Enterprise, and we get to see some of that society as well. I don't think we've ever been on Tellar.
No.
Mm-mm.
I don't think I know anything about that planet from canon.
I always wondered, do people tip at the Cisco restaurant? And if so, what?
Yeah, right.
Pull pocket knife and kind of shaves off some latinum flakes. There you go. Keep them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Well, since everyone in the Federation is not making money, but is sort of improving themselves, perhaps they give great book recommendations or
a tip in a different sense.
Have you considered this piece of Vulcan philosophy? Oh, thanks. That's an excellent tip. Right.
Well, in one of the episodes where Picard was talking about his experience at the Academy, he made the comment of like spending all of his allotment, and I don't remember what he referenced, but he used all of it to teleport home to his family for meals, like pretty much every day for like the first quarter he was at the Academy. So there is something that is transacted.
Yeah. You see Dr.
Yeah.
Crusher buying some fabric in the first episode of Next Gen, I think. And she's like,
Right.
bill it to the ship. Like, what?
Right.
Well,
Right.
I guess obviously the Enterprise and the Federation, they have to have some way of paying cultures that still use money or barter trade. But within the Federation, it is very vague. They pretty much kind of dance around it in any Star Trek series. The idea that we're a post-scarcity, socialist economy, but are we?
Well, he point blank has that speech in First Contact with what's her name from Zephram Cochrane's timeline when she sneaks on board the Enterprise, Lily. Yeah. Where he just full on breaks it down that like, there's no money. So what?
Yeah. And in Star Trek 4, the big thing that one of the Kirk says is that we're going to have to find some money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. Is that a lie?
Yeah, it's a good scene.
And yet, I think it might be the first time that Harry Mudd shows up, Kirk is giving him hell about infringing on IP rights of somebody. You remember this?
Right. Well, look, before replicators, the transition of the Federation from whatever it was into sort of fully automated space communism it takes place between Star Trek the Original Series and Star Trek the Next Generation.
Totally right.
Because Star Trek the Original Series, I can remember Kirk saying to Scotty in the episode with the Doomsday device, right? The Doomsday machine. Scotty, you've just earned your pay for the week. What the hell are you talking about? There is no pay, right? Well, except there was in TOS, but there isn't in TNG. Why? Because of replication, right? Once you have replication, then how do you have scarcity? And without scarcity, how do you have a market economy? I mean, full stop, right? That's not to make any claims about whether it's good or bad, but I simply don't know how you'd run a market economy on our principles.
Unless it's all just like creativity based. If there's just like this huge industry of people just like 3D modeling shit for replication, and that's like,
yeah, right.
That's the scarcity is creativity.
Well, there's some points in Deep Space Nine where they're talking about like the holodeck and or the holosuites, and there is intellectual property.
Yeah,
because people do own the rights to these programs, and then in Voyager they're going through all of the holo programs that they got, and they're starved for more entertainment because they've run through all of the programs they have.
Right. I would so run a crew through a Captain Proton, Dr. Chaotica kind of thing. If the crew was, I'm running a Star Trek game as we speak. And sadly, we selected a time frame where, we don't have access to that technology. But if we did, I would totally bring Chaotica forward. He's actually the actor who plays Chaotica is, the father of one of my former students when I taught in Dallas. So, as a gift 100 years ago, I got a signed script Bride of Chaotica. I've still got it in my collection, you gotta Star Trek, you gotta sometimes camp it up a little bit. Don't be so serious all the time,
Yeah. And we've talked a lot about all the heavy, serious themes and
Sure.
choices that you've got to make, the dilemmas you're facing. But yeah, there's a lot of episodes that are just it's fun and
correct.
And if you're playing a role-playing game, you definitely want to have those episodes. You want to have a holodeck episode, or you want to have a Ryza, like going to the Pleasure Planet of Ryza episode to kind of balance it out, because or even like the Trouble with Tribbles, where it's a very serious problem, but I mean, it's kind of funny too.
Oh, they're kind of cute, right?
Right. The episode of DS9 where they go back to Deep Space Station K7 and all of that. Oh, I just love 22nd century technology. Dax is lovingly, rubbing a tricorder from the era, and she's got the skimpy little dress on. She looks fabulous. Terry Farrell looks fabulous, right? And both Bashir and O'Brien sort of slip very quickly into TOS stereotyping,
Yep.
right? Yeah, that episode is without peer.
Troubles and Tribulations.
James T. Kirk, he's a menace, a galactic menace, right? Yeah. And I think the way to understand Trek as something a little less serious is to really lean into the animated series, which is bonkers as hell,
Oh, yeah.
but kind of fun, but batshit crazy.
I'm very curious what we're going to see out of this Lower Decks comedy animated series that's coming out.
Full stop.
I have no idea what to expect from it.
What is this?
So as part of CBS, they're kind of like, we're gonna ramp up with, is it 4 Trek series? 3 Trek series?
I haven't heard this.
There's at least 3 more in production.
Holy shit.
They're really trying to make their all access platform viable, but also I believe the ever present competition with Star Wars. It's a space race, so to speak. And anyway, one of those series is an animated series called, I think it's just going to be called Lower Decks. And it is about a group of officers on like the least important starship in the galaxy. And it is a comedy series. I don't know if it's going to be considered canon. I'm pushing up my nerd glasses considering that possibility, but I don't know what to expect from it. I don't know if it's going to be geared at adults, teenagers. I have no idea.
Weird.
Yeah, no way to know what they're going to do with that, right? The short treks, the sort of 10 to 15 minute productions that they have between seasons of Discovery, right? They made 4 before Discovery, and then they made 4 more between Discovery. We've got 8 of them. 2 of them were animated. One of them telling a story that basically launches Discovery, a story that Michael Burnham hears as a young girl. And then the other was, basically the adventures of a tardigrade and a repair robot on the Enterprise that takes us through 25 years of Star Trek history. It was fun. Yeah, but this Lower Decks thing, who knows, right?
It's interesting that you're going to see purpose-made comedy, because Star Trek has always been funny, lighthearted in many ways. But this is a comedy show. We on another episode we had talked about how it is difficult to do comedy in a role-playing game sometimes. I would not have...
I remember that episode.
Oh, cool. I would not have imagined running a Star Trek game and having it, maybe this Lower Decks show really takes off, is very popular, and maybe somebody runs a zany Star Trek comedy role-playing campaign. Something I would have not imagined.
Right. Boy, that is so player dependent, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I play with really, really, really skilled role players, but I think if I said we're gonna do this comedy style, they'd be like, yeah, no, a one-off maybe, but as a campaign, no way.
I know I couldn't do it.
Yeah, there's no way I couldn't do it. I'm much more, I'm much more into the kind of gravitas kind of tone, the big sweeping epic, everything is at stake kind of thing, which is what makes me crazy angry with Trek sometimes, when they take these great premises and they don't do with them what they ought to, right? You're talking about the fact that Discovery may have been stolen wholesale from another game. Well, the first role-playing game of Star Trek was published by FASA in the late 80s and early 90s. And in that game, I basically created a campaign that was Voyager in 1991. Mine was super dark because it should be dark, right? I mean, you are now 60,000 light years from home, and you've got the great uncharted, mass of the galaxy to get through to get home. Well, and if things don't go perfectly, then things are going to get really hard on people. And Voyager should have had more integrity than that. It should have not become Star Trek The Next Generation in the Delta Quadrant. It should have learned the lesson of DS9 and Babylon 5, which is you can make a prestige format program before we even know what that is. You can tell us one story that takes place over multiple episodes, like the X-Files. There can be a canon. There can be a mythology, right? And you ought to give that to us instead of it being no different than television in the 60s. And, when I GM Trek, I wanted to have that prestige format, Game of Thrones, Discovery flavor, DS9 flavor, right? Things matter. What you're doing really matters. You're not the Enterprise, but doesn't matter. You matter. Where you are is of grave concern, right? That kind of thing.
And you don't have an infinite supply of shuttlecrafts to get destroyed in order to solve your problems.
Correct. Correct.
It's funny talking about developing something on your own and then seeing that kind of, not through plagiarism, but just because you had a good idea and someone else had that idea too. Yeah. One of the true feathers in my, admittedly not as, prestigious as the rest of yours, RPG, careers is the Star Trek, 3 or 4 shot that I ran, that was all about, the episode, The Survivors. There is a sort of immortal, powerful, omnipotent race of beings called the Dowd, and he falls in love with a human woman. This Dowd does, and the planet gets destroyed, and they have this little farmhouse, right, on a green little square patch of land. And anyway, in his rage, he completely eradicates the entire race called the Husnak. And I'm thinking,
great episode.
I'm going to run this little mini campaign about, the Borg are here. We are working on purpose-built warships. Oh, wait, remember the Husnak? They had crazy, powerful planet-killing technology, and their entire civilization is now just derelict with none of them around because he vaporized all of them instantly. Let's go to the Husnak system and see what kind of, Borg fighting tech we can get. Very proud of it, very happy with that idea, and I found out today while doing some research that, when did I run that game? It was a few years ago.
Maybe 5 years ago.
So in
Trip was still here.
In 2017 or 18, there was a Star Trek Titan novel, following, Admiral Will Riker, captain of the Star Trek, of the USS Titan, with that exact plot. So yeah. Oh well.
Well look, if it's a good hook, it's a good hook.
Yep.
Right? And if you know anything about writing and storytelling, you've got just as much capacity to pull out the good hook as anyone else does. Right? It's super frustrating though, isn't it? I was like, God damn it.
Yeah.
Give me Voyager.
Yeah. Let me write a Star Trek Titan novel.
My show will be better than that. Right? Even my show might might be crap in 100 other ways, but it won't be crap in this way, which is the way that's bugging me.
Well, you wouldn't have 7 of 9 running an orphanage?
God bless.
Hey, though,
7
to
of
go
9
back,
is just about the only thing that makes sense in that whole show. That she was great. I liked her a lot, and I like Catherine Janeway, but the rest of it, sorry.
Briefly, to go back to our first question posed about ranking Star Trek themes, I have a real soft spot for the Star Trek Voyager theme. I think it's really good.
It's the best of the lot.
Very
it's
good.
The best one.
Oh, thank you. It's really up there for me. It gets stuck in my head constantly.
I had a CD that was like the Voyager soundtrack. It was awesome.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Yep. It is and remains the best one to me.
Back when I used to do Star Trek role playing via internet relay chat.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was with an organization called the United Confederation of Interstellar Planets that I believe still exists as a now play by email role play group. But anyway,
nice.
If you're out there listening to the show, reach out. I'd love to find out what's going on in the UCIP, which is. Ooh, bad acronym. Anyway, wow, just realized that.
Yeah. Well, you went there.
Anyway, while doing this, admittedly very kind of old school style of roleplay, YouTube wasn't around really, and I didn't have that CD that you're talking about, Jordan. So I would go on people who would make MIDI covers of Star Trek themes. I would listen to the MIDI covers of the Star Trek themes, including the Voyager themes, over and over again. Oh, yeah.
Nice.
The United Confederation
of Interstellar Planets. It was just the name of their.
Are they way into
outfit.
systems rights or something?
I think it was UCIP.org. Oh boy. Anyway, that still exists.
There it is.
All right, we won't go there anymore. But
yeah.
Can we talk about Deep Space Nine?
Please. It's the best.
Well, you brought it up, and for my money, we brought up in the last episode where we were talking about this a little bit about, I made the point that I think the composure and etiquette that is expected of Starfleet officers is something that is not going to come naturally to a lot of people that would just gravitate to D&D or something like that. It's a very different kind of role-playing experience. But I think that the really dark times of the Federation, like the Dominion War, for instance, is one of the best places to drop people who are not super familiar with all the protocol and whatever, to have that latitude, because it's in a time of war. Even the pinnacles of morality, or, captains and whoever are pulling off really terrible shit because the times demand it. But yeah, and it's a lot more natural to say, go to this place and kill everything than it is so we're scanning stuff for this particle and what the fuck are we doing here? You know what I mean?
Yeah. The great thing about the DS9 universe, particularly for a play group that, to your point, maybe can't quite get to that lofty, high Roddenberry TNG kind of place, right? Is the DS9 frame not only allows you to bring in Federation officers who maybe have a little bit more roguishness about them, but it lets you bring Bajorans fully into the play group, and the Bajorans, just use Major Kira as your exemplar character, Ro Laren from TNG, and and you're in with a chance, because they don't follow Federation ethics and values. They care less about that. And a bit later in DS9, you get to bring Klingons into the conversation, who are allied in a shaky way with the Federation. You get those Klingon houses in there. Well, this is pretty much the only framework of Star Trek where you can have Federation characters, non-Federation characters. You could even have someone who was of a right mind to play a Ferengi. I'm not sure that I could do that, but maybe there's players out there who would find that an interesting challenge, right?
Yeah, if somebody's way into playing rogue assassins, you could easily get a Cardassian in there.
Yeah,
you got a prime example.
Yeah, you could easily imagine the Federation, or indeed the Bajorans, chartering a ship with a specific mission to go into the into the Gamma Quadrant and perform the following rogue operations. It's like, it's not the, it's 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds. It's 5-year mission to undermine the Dominion, to seek new allies and to destroy shipping lanes, to boldly go where no ship has gone before, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that ship captained by a rogue human who was sort of Maquis-ish,
mm-hmm.
In orientation, or sort of a Tom Paris kind of vibe from Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
Some Bajoran characters, a Klingon or two, and a Ferengi. Bob's your uncle, right?
Yeah.
That'd be a fun game.
I mean, even on the Defiant, like, part of the reason they got to have a cloaking device, part of the stipulation was they got a Romulan officer on board, like, monitoring the thing the whole time. So
yeah. I mean, that totally works, right? And the great sweep of that story is so well told in DS9 that you could have your players watching it, if they hadn't seen it previously, as you go, to learn about, well, how is the war progressing? Well, this happens. And then you play 2 or 3 episodes. You play 2 or 3 games. Now this episode happens. All right. Now it's one session, and then these 2 episodes happen. Right? Keeping them really in the canon, right?
For the problem of, if you had players who didn't know Star Trek, I would argue, like, and you want to kind of get them into this Star Trek mind frame, I would argue set the game immediately after the final episode of Enterprise. I'm not counting the series finale.
Yeah,
These are the
no.
voyages of the final episode, because it was just a holodeck simulation on TNG, etc.
It's an abomination.
But the last real episode of Enterprise takes place 5 years before the foundation of the Federation. So you could still, like, the only reason why, like, Jonathan Archer is one of those Paragon people. Maybe you've got another ship out there that's doing basically the same mission as Enterprise, one of the NX class ships, and they don't have a captain who is quite as upstanding, and this is part of the reason why the Federation designs some of its tenets, wants some of its guarantees, is
right.
Because these guys are out there making these mistakes.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
You got a captain that's like a Christopher Columbus type of character.
Yeah.
He's like showing up to colonize.
Yeah. NX-05, the Federation starship Atlantis or something like that, that's really a problematic ship, right?
Or even do like an Andorian crew. Where the Andorians are very emotional, and I mean, I feel like if you just told your players, okay, you guys are going to be playing this race called Andorians. I'm not going to tell you anything else about them, because you're role players, and by default, you generally play these types of characters.
Yeah. This will be a real these Andorians, they're going to fit like a glove, my friends. You'll know how to do this easily. Can I take 10 seconds out of this to say, Jeffrey Combs, please give him more work. Give him anything. He is without peer in the genre space to me. I talk about him anytime my co-host and I over on the Babylon 5 podcast, we do talk about, well, let's say, what if we recasted Babylon 5? Well, I'm going to make Jeffrey Combs the lead, because the man is a genius.
Yeah, he deserves it.
Yeah, if you took Jeffrey Combs out of Star Trek, you would gut like half the series.
Yeah,
I think. in a big way.
Right. You would fatally undermine Enterprise. Okay.
And Deep Space Nine with the Weyoun.
And you would fatally undermine DS9. Weyoun could be a break. He's the best villain ever.
Yep.
Right? Oh, he's so unctuous. You just want to reach through the screen and slap him. Right? And I just love him. Love him. He's my absolute favorite. I play Star Trek Timelines, and Weyoun is my avatar.
What are you confused about, Kyle? You had a confused look.
Is Star Trek Timelines, is that a mobile game? What is that?
Yeah, it's like an iPad kind of game. It's kind of like an MMO for the Star Trek universe, right? So imagine if an event happens and it causes all of the timelines of Star Trek to converge into one post-Crisis on Infinite Earths kind of thing. And so you end up with characters who are from every possible dimension and explication of Star Trek all kind of working together. And, you send your crew on missions and you fight PvP battles and you send your crew on voyages and you level your characters, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of my jam.
That's cool.
It's like a fun thing, like 10 minutes a day just to kind of riff on. It's fun, but it's a little repetitive, right? I've been playing it for a long time now, so have a look at it.
That would be interesting to have a role-playing group comprised of a bunch of characters, not only of different species, but plucked from different timelines.
Totally.
I don't know why I've never considered this before, but that'd be really cool.
These are the voyages of the USS Metaverse.
And with Star Trek Generations, there's already a mechanism built into Star Trek for doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the Nexus.
Exactly. The challenge of that is you'd need a role-playing group that was basically like the four of us.
Yeah.
Who really know their Trek. The game I'm running now, I've got 2 guys who are really knowledgeable. And I've got 1 who's pretty knowledgeable and 2 who Trek isn't their jam, right? And if I had just the 3, then I could do all kinds of crazy stuff with them. But the 2 who don't know the canon, there's no point. You drop these little nuggets and they don't even get it. So they can't respond to it properly. Right?
Yep.
Right. And so I don't know. Down the road, guys, maybe, little remote role playing.
Yeah, that was one of the strengths of the game KP ran, was that all of the players were we were all Star Trek nerds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even the other 2 players who aren't here, they were really into Star Trek. So whenever something was going on, we knew exactly what we needed to do, what the Trek answer to,
right.
how to,
right.
Not what the answer was, but how to go about finding the answer.
Right. There's an answer and there's a Trek answer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. On a smaller note, we also knew, or the players also knew, how to respond to like something ridiculous a Ferengi says. It's like, you quote out some rule of acquisition, and experienced role players but inexperienced Trekkies might be like, what?
Yeah, right.
What are you doing, dude?
Right. Where somebody who understands Ferengi culture is going to come right back.
Right.
Hey, John, in the last episode, a question came up. I'm curious what your answer is. We were discussing if you got somebody that doesn't know a damn thing about Trek, where would you start them?
Yeah, tricky, right?
Uh-huh.
I think the first thing I would do is make sure that I knew when the game was going to be. Okay. And then try to populate their knowledge with the critical episodes around that time to really help them to understand where and when they are, mindful that there's a lot of context that they would lose, right? So you want, like, let's say you were doing this post-Enterprise kind of thing, right? I'm not sure. There's not a lot of content on that, so it's such a hard question, right? Mm-hmm. You look at Star Trek, the original series, there's probably 10 episodes that you have to watch. And you cited some of them, right? Balance of Terror, Journey to Babel, City on the Edge of Forever, those kind of seminal classics they're not dependent on the special effects being sort of goofy or whatever, right? Trek is so much about the philosophy of what it means to be a sentient life form that you want anything that is interacting with that question to be sort of foregrounded, right? So you talked about the measure of man, right? In Star Trek: The Next Generation season 2, is Data sentient, right? And that's gonna, there's definitely a connection there into Picard. So if you want the Picard program to make sense, that would be something you want to get some knowledge of. It's so hard because I'm so deeply in it that I have a hard time editing that list, right? I think you want to know when you are. In listening to the show, I was listening to you guys talk about, well, maybe you start with Wrath of Khan, you start with the movies. I don't think that's a good idea. Because, well, and I mean, my answer is Star Trek is primarily a television experience. It's not a cinema experience.
Right.
So you want to embed the knowledge in the television part of the universe. So, I mean, for me, sort of my favorite episodes of, say, the original series are Balance of Terror, The Doomsday Machine, The Immunity Syndrome, the Space Amoeba, right? A Private Little War. Is that what that's called? With the people of Eminiar and Vendikar fighting each other by means of computer warfare.
Yeah.
Right? I have actually had a game set. The first thing they did, the first episode of the game was return to Eminiar 7 and see where we are with that. I quite like the Enterprise incident with the Romulan female commander, getting a sense of kind of that Romulan command structure and how Romulans think, because the Romulans are my preferred villain. And then sort of, onward, there's so many great episodes of TNG and DS9. Good grief, right? Yeah. I could send you a list that you could put on your webpage, but it's too hard to answer,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're going to watch one episode of each show. Enterprise is probably maybe the second last episode of season 3 when the Xindi storyline resolves. TOS, probably City on the Edge of Forever.
Wait, it is City on the Edge of Forever then, huh?
Isn't it?
No,
am I wrong?
Well, so, okay, we're gonna look it up right now.
Oh, I know you guys were fighting about this last time.
Yeah, Clayton convinced me I was wrong. I just generally defer to his judgment. City on the Edge of Google autocompletes to Forever. Boom. Point me, point John.
Forever.
0 points Clayton.
Wait, what was the other one?
We thought it was City on the Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, the Guardian of Tomorrow.
Guardian of Tomorrow.
The City on the Edge of Forever. Yeah.
Had them swapped. Man, I'm vindicated.
Yeah. Well, my work here is done.
Anyway, a great episode. What do you say we quit this bullshit? Okay,
Yeah, right. Let's get you guys have to watch episode 1 of Picard because because we've been at this for an hour and 10 minutes, and we haven't even talked systems yet.
No.
So at some point down the road, when you want to do Trek 3, or when you want to do maybe a comparison of different intellectual property frameworks in RPGs. Like I liked your Mad Max episode a lot, right? Because that's a suitable. I think there are some intellectual properties that are really well suited to role-playing game adaptations, and others that aren't. And Trek, I think, is because its nature is television and it's episodic, etc. It's really well suited to RPG campaign development. But the more cinematic it is, the more it's based on movies. To me, the less likely it is to generate a good role-playing game. But
you mentioned
that's for another show.
You mentioned the FASA game system. I never played that one. I played the one that's several years old now. It's like a 2D10 system.
Yeah, the Decipher.
Yeah. And there's a new one now that I haven't touched yet.
Modiphius.
What's your thoughts on the different game systems for Trek?
I played FASA the most, and then Modiphius, which is the new one I'm playing right now. And then the Decipher I played just a little bit, but not too much. I like the FASA system the best. It's crunchy because it's a system designed in the 80s, but I was designed in the 80s, so I'm fine, right? The character generation system is priceless. It generates a kind of very clear history and legacy of the character that in the hands of even moderately competent players can give you as the GM dozens of adventure hooks from characters' pasts, which is really nice. Okay. The great thing about the FASA system is for day-to-day sort of routine gaming, skill checks and what have you, it's very elegant and quite simple to manage. Okay. But the character generation system is a little tricky, but it generates great content. Okay, so you've got that going on.
Is it anything like the Traveler character creation?
It's not remotely like Traveler. I love the Traveler character creation system. I mean, it's similar to Traveler in the sense that you get a deep backstory, right? You get a deeper backstory in FASA than you get in Traveler, but you get a deep backstory. Unlike Traveler, where basically once you're fully baked, you're done. They don't do skill development and all that kind of stuff. You can still develop skills and gain experience, etc. in FASA. The FASA trek is all about figuring out how you fit into Starfleet. What have you done? Did you work in a galaxy exploration kind of ship, a really fancy ship, or have you spent most of your career in the merchant marine or, on a, colonial operation ship, that kind of thing, right? It helps to really create a nice character basis, for whatever the game you're going to play is. Now, the Modiphius system, they really understand the Star Trek universe. They understand Starfleet. The materials, the game itself is beautiful. The supporting materials are great. I don't like the character creation system as much as I like FASA's. And I find game mastering the Modiphius system to be fiddly. There's a lot of little things that you have to keep track of. And I like my systems to be sort of elegant and clean. I don't want to be doing a lot of mechanical work when I'm trying to tell a story.
What's the basic dice mechanism for Modiphius? I haven't looked at it at all.
It is, you've got skills and abilities that generate a certain number of dice that you roll, trying to match a certain number of kind of successes. Okay. And basically you add like a statistic and a skill together, and that generates the number you want to roll lower than. Okay. So it's like a D20, but rather than rolling high, you're trying to roll low, right?
All right.
The lower you roll, the better, right? So if you've got, like, I'm a game master and you're trying to intimidate Klingons, right? Okay, well, that's going to be command plus diplomacy. All right, you roll those two things together, and or you add those things together. It generates a number. You look at your own chart. Okay, well, if I'm going to a standard check, I get this many dice, but I'm going to modify it this way. I'm going to spend these points of momentum that we as a party have to get more dice. And, this person is there with me and they can help me. So they're going to add an extra die to my roll, this kind of thing. So it's a little crunchy.
Sounds like a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And part of the problem is I've only GM'd it about 4 times. So I'm not really in a kind of natural, kind of frame. I mean, most of the games that I run are in crunchy systems. So that's not a problem. I'm not really at my experience level yet. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But the FASA, go and get that FASA system. You pull it down from online because it's 35 years old now, and generate a crew using that character generation system. That's fun in and of itself. Yeah, my friend who we did that Gary 7. We did a Gary 7 game set in the FASA universe at Origins last year, and we had we had people coming out of the woodwork. Oh, FASA, woo! And they immediately saw the character sheets and sort of read the story, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is why I've always loved this system, right?" So it's worth it.
Nice.
I think we're gonna have to start wrapping up because we're getting pretty long in the tooth now.
Get out of here, Dad! I'm hanging out with my friends.
1 hour and 20 minutes. Dang.
Well, there's so much more to cover. I was joking when I made my "let's wrap it up" thing, but then
you said that at 65 minutes.
Wow. I looked at the time and realized, oh no, what have I done? But yeah, we're gonna have to do this again.
Totally. Hold a gun to my head.
When you guys watch Picard, when Picard's done, let's set up a time and we'll evaluate Picard as a role-playing framework and pull in the rest of the stuff we want to talk about.
That sounds great. Having a laser focus.
Some cyberpunk Star Trek.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it looks like it's going to be fun. And you've got Patrick Stewart. What more do you want?
Yep. And I'm going to throw this out there as well. If it might be a bit of a challenge, considering we're in 2 different geographic locations, but doing some kind of a Star Trek game together, I'd be very down for that.
100%, yeah.
Sorry for the table talk there, listeners. We can cut that out, I suppose, but I wanted to get that out there.
Well, I've got to tell you that in about 2011, I started a game here in Southern California of Numenera, okay? Priceless role-playing system. One of the best ever designed, I think. And my partner and I moved to Pittsburgh. And we lived in Pittsburgh for 4 years, but I game mastered Numenera by Google Hangouts for years. In fact, this Star Trek game that I'm describing, I'm playing, is actually a sub-game within the Numenera game. We're actually still playing Numenera, but I have them in a sub-game that I'm calling Scheherazade, where we're going to play a number of different game systems that we want to try out with characters that are modeled on their Numenera characters.
Nice.
Wacky.
And then we'll go back into Numenera maybe in 3 or 4 years. So, yeah. I'm down. We need to talk about that.
Cool.
When we get finished with Picard and we have a look at at that show, and I'm on this show again, then at the end of that we can figure that out.
All right. Next time you'll be a featured guest or a featured host.
Right. Exactly. I can't wait.
So let's do geek things real quick. John, do you want to start with geek things? Do you have anything?
Oh, good grief! What am I doing? I am hosting a conference on game-based learning tomorrow. When we're recording, it'll be Sunday the 26th, and I've got a bunch of new board games and things that I'm going to bring out there to screw around with. A bunch of people coming to talk, and I'm looking forward to that. So that's where my focus has been. And I just finished watching Watchmen. Oh my God!
We're
so
a few
good.
episodes into it. Yeah. I'm loving it.
Oh, so dark. That's my story.
It's a nice sequel to the graphic novel and not the movie.
Agreed. Yeah, that's how I'd put it.
I've only got a couple geek things. One of them is a YouTube channel called Voices of the Past. Readings of primary sources from things throughout history. In particular, the one I started listening to was a primary source of a Chinese historian in the 3rd century CE visiting Rome.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing is actually a Star Wars thing. There was a fan-made trailer for The Mandalorian, just called Il Mandaloriano, and it's done in the style of a Sergio Leone spaghetti western.
Oh, I'm all in.
Nice.
Brilliant.
I guess I'm going to do a shameless plug because it'll take a week or 2 for this to come out, right?
Sure.
Okay. So I am in the process of converting my role-playing game Apocalyptia into a web application, sort of a virtual tabletop kind of thing. And it is very much in beta right now, but I've just about got the character creator finished and the rules reference is up. It is at apocalyptiaonline.com if somebody wants to check it out and send me emails and yell at me about what's broken so that I can fix them at info@apocalyptiarpg.com. So yeah, apocalyptiaonline.com. That's what I'm working on right now.
Nice.
I've got just one thing. I recently finished reading a Star Trek novel called The Buried Age by Christopher L. Bennett. It is kind of in preparation for Picard, though I didn't start this book knowing the Picard series would ever exist. I started it a few years ago, and for no particular reason I put it down. And then knowing Picard was coming out, I finished it. The book starts with Picard captaining the Stargazer and the incident with the Ferengi that led to its presumed destruction. It then goes into Picard's court-martial, and then the bulk of this novel deals with what Picard does in the interim there, where he's kind of... his time in Starfleet is kind of in question. He's, been disgraced, or so he believes. And it starts out a little bit slow, despite those very interesting things I mentioned that it kind of jumps into. But I'm really glad that I finished it, and I would highly recommend it to anybody, especially people who love that character and are curious kind of what he gets up to before he captains the Enterprise D. Minor spoiler, the end of the book also kind of goes into how he chooses some members of the crew that you see are already on the ship during encounter at Farpoint. So very, very cool little novel, and very appropriate time to maybe pick it up and read it with Picard here coming out. I'd be curious to see if any, similarities happen there.
All right, guys. What do you say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice?
Ooh.
Okay.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.